Today I want to tell a little bit about a game called Versailles or Versailles, like we say around here when we're talking about Versailles, Indiana. Whichever way you want to pronounce it, this is a game about the construction of the legendary palace. 2 to 5 players, and the players take on the role of master builders, constructors, architects, of an ensemble, of a team that is trying to put together the palace, and you will get credit and score points for building beautiful sections of the palace. It's a Euro game in the stricter, purest sense of the word. Wooden cubes, wooden meeples, little or virtually no luck involved. There's a randomness in the way in which some resources become available, but when it comes to the actions that the players decide to take and the result of those actions, the game is airtight. There is no randomness there. Let me show you how the game works. Look at the pretty board. I really like this board. I like the look of it. It's also very functional. The art is nice, the colors are nice, but also there are reminders all around the board of the functions of each area. You do not have, however, player aids that summarize the information on the board. So at the beginning of the game, when players are not familiar, they may spend some time looking around to make sure that they know exactly what the various locations on the board do. Locations are connected by paths, as you can see here, and these paths have directional arrows. The meeples that the players control move from location to location, but they have to follow the directions on the arrows, which means that generally speaking, meeples will move in a circle from location to location, with some exceptions. From most locations around this circular area here, there are ways of entering the central area, the construction yard, and from there are only 2 ways out. One is here and one is from here. So it is not just going to be running in circles, because at any time you may have a meeple leaving the outside circle, getting the backyard, coming out in different ways. There is more movement here than we thought there would be, more movement options, and yet restrictions that make the programming, this choosing movement quite interesting. Each player has a set of meeples, which are placed in different locations at the beginning of the game, following setup instructions, and not all players set up meeples in the same locations. We also have an action token. I'll explain later what that is. Now, how does it work? During your turn, you usually move one of your meeples from one location to another, following a path along a directional arrow. Ta-da! That is for basic movement. However, you also have 2 double movement tokens. You can exhaust one of them during your turn, in which case you're able to move a meeple by 2 locations, or you can move 2 meeples from one location into another location. After you moved, you can perform an action in the location into which you just moved, and when you perform an action, you place your action token there. That is simply a reminder that this turn, indeed, you did perform an action there, and this will limit your action taking and your movement next turn, because when you're moving meeples, you cannot move into a location that has your action token from the previous turn. That just prevents you from activating the same action over and over again. This is it. This is the game, okay? We can wrap it up. You move, you perform actions. Ta-da! Well, no, actually, the core of the game, when the game really gets good, is when you perform the actions. And of course, it is interesting. The point is to figure out ways of using your actions well. Some locations will give you resources. That area where I have those 3 orange meeples is the quarry, and will generate marble for you. You use white cubes to indicate the amount of marble that you gain, and the number of cubes that you gain is based on the number of meeples that you have there when you're activating the location. 1 meeple, 1 marble, 2 meeples, 2 marble, 3 for 3. The Gold mine works in a similar way, that is, you gain resources, but mining gold is a little tougher. A single meeple will give you nothing, 2 meeples will give you a gold, and 3 meeples 2 gold. There is another location on the board that gives you one of the 3 basic resources. It is the lumber mill, and it has the same, and buying or producing lumber has the same cost as marble, which is a cube of that resource for each meeple that you have there when you're activating that area. Those resources will be used to purchase stuff. For example, you can purchase decorations, which you will later use to decorate the areas of the palace that you're building. When you're there, and you activate that location as your action, then you can purchase these tiles based, again, on the number of meeples that you have there when you're activating the location, and also based on the resources that you're willing to spend. This is the cost. To purchase this decoration here, I need to have 2 meeples there and to spend 4 lumber, for example. Here we have I'll call the technology tree. This location technically is called the Alchemist's Guild. The name sounds a little silly to me because we're not in a fantasy setting. What happens here is that simply when you activate that location, again, what you can do is based on the number of meeples that you have there during the activation, and you can advance any of your markers along the corresponding track, and each time that you advance it, you gain a new technology, you gain a new ability. If you have multiple meeples, you can advance multiple markers or the same marker by multiple spaces. For example, if I had 2 meeples here, I could choose to do like this, 1 and 1, because that's all I need there. If I wanted to do that, to take that technology, I would need to spend the resource and also to pay a cube. But with 2 cubes, I could do 1 and 1, or I could have done 1 and 1, something like that. These technologies allow you to get extra resources when you do gain resources, so an extra lumber, an extra marble, an extra gold, anytime that you would receive that type of resource. These 2 lines rely on the same concept. They simply allow you to activate your meeples out of turn. That is, if you have this technology, you will be able to collect lumber if you have meeples in the lumber mill when somebody else activates it. So if somebody activates it, you also take in the action of collecting lumber. But you need to have your meeples there, because also the number of lumber tokens that you gain is based on the number of meeples that you have. So you pretty much have an activation or an action out of turn. This one allows you to collect marble if you have meeples in the marble quarry when somebody else is taking the action of collecting marble. This one the same for gold. And this one allows you to activate your meeples in specific locations when other peoples are also activating that location. So again, out of turn. And this symbol here allows you to purchase decorations, which is in the location that I just showed you. This one allows you to buy architectural designs. And this technology, if you have it, allows you to build parts of the palace out of turn. Again, if you have the meeples that are necessary to do so. This area here is called the King's Favor. It is pretty much, I would say, around here. This is what we use as the King's Favor. You see those meeples there, those are meeples that you do not have at the beginning of the game, but if you get there and you activate that location, then as your action you can get an extra meeple if you have 2 meeples there, or you can get this other meeple if you have 3 meeples there during the activation. So you can recruit up to 2 extra meeples. There is, however, another action here, which you can see there on top. If you have a meeple there and you use it for that action, then you will be able to refresh your double movement tokens, because these tokens, once you use them, they're exhausted, but there are 2 locations on the board that allow you to refresh them so you can use them again, and this is one of those 2 locations. However, King's Favor is a tricky location. When people start having a lot of activities, the king becomes nervous and he starts nervously pacing this path because he wants to go and see the palace and wants to see what these crazy constructors and carpenters and architects are doing. So every time that the location of called King's Favor is activated, or every time somebody moves through it, which can be done only using double movement, when one of these two things occur, then the king's pawn will move by one spot, by one box in that path. And when the king reaches the last space of the path, then that triggers the end of the game. Important location that I kept for almost the last one is the Architects Guild, which allows you to purchase architectural designs. Now, there is a stack, I stacked them in 2 stacks, but it's a single stack of tiles which you use to actually build the palace. But here you're going there to purchase the designs. The tiles that you can buy are based on the number of meeples that you have when you're activating that area. You have 2 meeples, then you could purchase this tile here, or this tile here, or you could choose to purchase these 2 tiles here using a meeple for each. The top tile requires also a gold together with 2 meeples. When you purchase a tile, you place it in your play area. Suppose I purchase these, you place them in your play area, and you can have up to 4 at any one time. If you purchase more, you have to discard the ones that are in excess. After you have purchased your tiles, the other tiles slide down and you replace them. These tiles have 2 sides. One shows the nice architecture that the tile will create once the construction is finished, and the other one shows the cost to actually build that tile, as well as the number of victory points that you score by building that tile. Before we get there, one last thing, you could also choose to activate the Architects Guild to simply remove one of these cards. So you spend a meeple to remove a card so that the other ones will slide down, and you can you could spend 2 meeples to remove 3 cards and slide down the other ones and refresh and partially refresh the Architects Guild. And also you could activate the guild to refresh one of your double movement markers. So all of this craziness you're doing because you pretty much are trying to acquire the architectural designs to build the palace, and you're also trying to acquire the resources to actually build the palace. When you are here, when you have meeples here and you activate that location, then you're allowed to build tiles, but you need to pay the cost again to have the necessary number of meeple there to perform the job, and you need to spend the resources. Sometimes it will be simply basic resources, sometimes it will be resources and decorations. Remember, decorations are pretty expensive to get, which is why tiles with decorations are usually worth more victory points. When you're building your tiles, you have to place them adjacent to tiles that are already on the board for printed on the map, or they have to at least be adjacent to an edge of the board. Edges may be white or green, depending on interior exterior location, and the tiles that you place have to match the edge. For example, that would be a legal placement because I have 2 white sides that are matching those. This also would be a legal placement. So actually, as the palace is getting built, the options of where to place the tiles diminish, because you have to find spots where it is legal to build things, and other players may build things in weird ways that make it tougher for you to actually place your tiles. If the stack of available architectural designs is exhausted and there's a discard pile, you shuffle the tiles together to form another stack. However, if at that point the stack that you formed from the discard pile has 7 tiles in it or less, the game is over. That condition also triggers the end of the game, just as the arrival of the king in that location would end the game. At that point, you tally victory points. Players should have collected victory points, which are recorded on that track throughout the game as they build tiles. Then at the end of the game, players can also exchange resources that they may still have for victory points. 3 lumber or 3 marbles are worth a victory point. 2 gold are worth a victory point. Each tile that you still have in your play area and you have not built is worth a victory point. Each decoration that you have in your play area and you have not built is worth 3 victory points. Now, to get started with the game took a while. Playing the game when you're not very experienced, especially if you're playing with 4 or 5 players, can take a while because there are no player rates available. Then players do spend an excessive amount of time looking around the board. This can be mitigated simply by playing it twice, playing it more often. Once the players become familiar with the resources available, with the actions that are possible, with more or less the cycle of production, or to say the recommended cycle of production. Because sure, you can go around the board, but it is actually in the ways in which you manage to break the cycle and you time your actions well, and you organize the interaction of your workers well, that you're really maximizing the possibilities that the game gives you. So you have all of these elements, but when players are not completely familiar with them, the game can be a little long. One thing, you can encourage players to start thinking ahead, because there is, in the earliest phases of the game, virtually no interaction. There is more indirect interaction later, when it comes to grabbing the tiles that become available in the Architects Guild, because certain tiles will be easier to place rather than others. And actually the game can become quite interactive and quite confrontational, to almost raising to the level of backstabbing, when several tiles of the palace have been placed in the grid around the table, and not all configurations are possible. Then you see that a player has a certain tile and it's your turn to build a tile, and if you build your tile in a certain way, then the tile of the opponent becomes impossible. And maybe that's a tile that the opponent took a while to acquire, and it took the opponent a long time to gather the resources, and right before the opponent does that, you make that tile completely useless. The game can also end, there's another end game condition, if the grid is completed. I don't know that that will happen very often, because to complete the entire palace, you need to find the right configuration. It seems to me that it's more likely that the game will end in different ways, especially if one of the players is way ahead, and that the player can try to end the game early by activating the king's favor location, which is something that I didn't feel that it broke the game in any way. It made it interesting, it gave it a more exciting feel towards the end, as indeed one player is trying to end the game and everybody else is at that point trying to score last tile, or simply to gather whatever desperate resources at the point can give them some extra victory points in the end. Overall, this is a pretty good game. It takes a while, as I said, to become familiar with it, to really be able to make your actions flow organically one from the other. It takes a while to figure out how to use your workers well, but the game per se is not complicated. Like, teaching the rules is not something that takes long. Absorbing the rules is not something that is all that hard. I've seen players struggling a little bit only with the technologies, with the idea that you take actions out of turn, even only if you have your own meeples in the location that you're activating. Didn't seem all that difficult to me, but I've seen players becoming a little feeling a little confused towards the beginning. The learning curve is not steep, making it sound steeper than it is. I would just say that the first game is going to be slower and less exciting than the future ones, but the game is pretty good. I mean, this is a very solid design, worker placement in essence, but with that puzzle element based on the grid, where you're trying to score points and to place things in such a way that you're being a little bit of a jerk to other players and reducing the possibilities that they will have to score points. never enough actions, you will never feel that you're able to do everything. Then it becomes interesting because you have to face the decision, well, I could go and grab that architectural tile now, but maybe I'll place myself in a position that will make it hard then to collect the resources they need to actually put the design into the construction place, or maybe I'll collect the resources because I'm on my way there and it's just more convenient that way. Meanwhile, other players have grabbed all the good tiles, and other tiles that are available don't really match with the options that are still available on the grid. That's a great challenge that you have right there. You will often be faced with 2-3 possible things. This is why, even though technically you can and you should try to plan ahead a little bit, probably other options, possibilities pop up as the game progresses. The point is that I never felt that there were complete no-brainers in the game. The game offered plenty of decisions, and constantly decisions that felt never automatic, but that felt as options that I had to consider, which of course means that the game is interesting. The game keeps me interested, keeps me thinking, keeps me evaluating options, as I seen horror other players that have figured out ways of making the system work better than I did, and I'm trying to catch up and to be annoying to other players with tile placement or removing tiles from the available pool. Versailles. Versailles is a good Euro. It's a good Euro. My group enjoyed it. Definitely this was an unexpected hit. I would say a slow hit. People felt a little like, I don't know about this at the beginning, but actually then people really warmed up to this design. Versailles or Versailles is a fairly approachable Euro. Give it a game before it becomes fully familiar, then the game flows well, play time is reduced, and overall it is an engaging game with a lot of interesting decisions and nice, interesting interconnections between the decisions that will face you with meaningful choices along the design. So I liked it pretty much.